All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's rock and roll. Let's finish with the Asia trade, and then we'll continue to the Nvidia event. Then we'll do the Intel event.
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you joining us. From Connected Roads.
Oh, wait a minute. We didn't finish the Asia trade. My bad.
Again, really difficult to underestimate just how complex the situation really is.
We're hearing how Trump is instructing Marco Rubio to kind of lead the way when it comes to some of the reforms he wants to see, both economically, politically, in Venezuela. What else do we know about the team that is going to be perhaps enforcing and encouraging some of these changes that the U.S. wants to see in the country?
Yes, this is enormously, again, a complicated situation here, Averill. I think one of the things to really look at, too, is just in terms of how, oil companies ultimately get involved here. You've got Trump's energy secretary that's actually going to a conference in Miami later, where you've got some of the major oil companies there, including ConocoPhillips and Chevron, which is the only U.S. supermajor that actually operates in Venezuela at this point. Of course, to have any kind of further involvement in Venezuela is a really, really difficult subject to broach here. While they do have the world's largest oil reserves, the actual energy infrastructure in Venezuela is incredibly compromised and would potentially take tens of billions of dollars over a period of many years to rebuild here. So whether or not you actually see increased investment from some of these oil majors, or in some cases people getting into there, for the first time, I think is a bit difficult to parse. But certainly the Trump administration has a very vested interest in trying to see that kind of production and increase and that infrastructure be restored.
All right, Bloomberg managing editor Jill Deese is there. Chinese President Xi Jinping and South Korean leader Lee Jae-myung have reaffirmed bilateral ties at their second meeting in 2 months. It's a sign that both sides are working to stabilize relations as they face a range of geopolitical tensions. Let's get to our China correspondent, Min Lo in Hong Kong now. So, Min, what were the key outcomes from this meeting?
Yeah, pretty substantial. The two sides signed at least 14 MOUs on a range of issues, and President Lee Jae-myung was particularly keen to expand trade with China, especially given that South Korea's trade surplus with China has turned into a deficit since 2023, and the concern is that that deficit could become entrenched. So he cited areas like AI, like consumer goods, cultural goods. So he cited examples of beauty products, films, and games as potential areas for breakthrough use in the future. And we know that China has, of course, placed that informal ban on South Korean cultural goods, pop concerts, and the like, pretty much since that missile crisis in 2016. And the presidential aide of South Korea said it could still take a while for China to lift that ban, but they're hopeful that things are stabilizing, and if trust continues to build, we could soon see pop concerts, K-pop concerts soon resuming in Beijing in the longer term. But have a listen to what the South Korean president said when he met with President Xi yesterday.
The reason we created these initial robots was to solve a pretty basic problem. Weeds have become resistant to herbicides, and so then you have to use more of those chemicals. There's no resistance to a blade. The process is pretty simple. I am a farmer, so I designed it to work for farmers. They let us know when they planted the crop. We actually fly a drone. We use that drone to basically map the field. And then we come in and we use machine vision, AI algorithms. We're determining what the rows are. And as the robots are going around, they're talking to each other and deciding where they're going to go. The farmers don't have to even be there. We don't even have to be there. All right, final bots in position. I'm getting ready to spin them up. So we have weed cutting bots running through a field at a high speed, and we never touch the crops. We let them know when it's done. We give them a report at the end of this, and we try to keep it as simple as possible. There's a lot of advantages to robots. One is that they're small. They're lighter weight. They're much easier to maintain. They're much lower cost. Anything on our robots can be replaced in 15 minutes or less. And that was my edict working on poorly designed equipment growing up and throwing my wrenches across the farm. We build them ourselves right here in Kansas. The second thing is they can run day or night. Someone's going to have to work long days and nights. Is it a farmer out there on their tractor day and night, or is it a robot? We're basically trying to figure out what are the pain points? What is the issue for the farmer? And so we're trying to lower that stress level for them, and at the same time put them on a path to healthier crops, which means healthier food for all of us.
My name's John Neiman. We farm in Reno County. The farm we did last year with Greenfield Robotics on us. Oregon field. We ran the robots on 70 of the 80 acres. So we had 10 acres that we didn't have the robots run. There was like a 15, 20 bushel difference between the 10 acres that had not had the robots and what the rest of the field that had the robots. I see this as a next generation mindset. We want to do what's right for the future, and we want to do what's right now.
My name is Will Hasty, and I'm a farmer. Some of the most challenging parts of farming are to do what's best, but still do that profitably. We like working with Greenfield Robotics because it helps us achieve the goal of remaining profitable and growing as farmers. Because it doesn't matter what we do. If we can't make a profit, then we're not farming anymore. As Greenfield Robotics portfolio.
The president said when he met with President Xi yesterday.
2달 전 경주에서 만나고. It's only been 2 months, but I have that feeling that I'm meeting an old friend I haven't seen for a long time. It's quite cordial and heartwarming. For thousands of years, South Korea and China, as friendly neighbors, have forged friendly relations. I am ready to follow the trend of the times and work together with President Xi to usher in a new chapter in the development of South Korea and China ties.
There you go. So he is looking at the summit as a potential turning point and citing 2026 as potentially the year where we could see a full restoration of China-South Korean relations.
That balancing act. Min Min, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Bloomberg China correspondent Min Min Do for us. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
Following continuing. The US and more than 100 countries have finalized an agreement exempting American companies from some foreign taxes. The deal excludes US-based multinational firms from the 15% global minimum tax negotiated through the OECD. It also effectively blocks other countries from imposing more levies on some foreign subsidiaries of US multinationals. Saudi Arabia is cutting the price of its flagship crude for Asia for a third month amid signs of oversupply in the market. State producer Saudi Aramco lowered the price of its Arab Light crude grade to 30% premium to the regional benchmark for February. It comes as OPEC Plus sticks with its plan to pause supply increases in the first quarter. Stay with us. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg. Take a look at this chart on the Bloomberg terminal. It was a very good day for Chevron and many of the other US oil majors as well. Chevron up 5%, but here's some context. That pink line right at the bottom of the screen there, that is Chevron, and you can see today's 5% bump doesn't look very big when you compare it to Chevron's Asia rivals, massively outperformed by CNOOC, PetroChina, and INPEX as well. Obviously an opportunity here, though, for US oil majors in Venezuela in terms of investments. President Trump is determined to see this happen. However, the infrastructure is severely degraded by decades of neglect. Probably going to need tens of billions of dollars in capex over a period of years to get things up to speed. Exxon, ConocoPhillips haven't really responded to requests for comments. There's some opportunities for sure, but also obvious questions around security and political risk in Venezuela. April.
Please, 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 Dad, can we keep him? We'll walk him, we'll feed him. We'll do everything.
Oh, he's perfect. But also, and political risk in Venezuela. April.
Yeah, it remains to be seen how much money these oil giants might be willing to pump in to Venezuela. Certainly, the commodity oil has been in focus as the U.S. capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro certainly grabbed headlines and perhaps opened some of these new fronts for geopolitical risk. For more on the outlook for oil, let's bring in Stephen Stepchinsky, who leads our Asia energy coverage. Stephen, what was interesting was we saw that gain, and in Asia, oil prices mostly holding on to that, but it wasn't a massive move. Markets right about this, you think?
I think we're definitely in a wait-and-see situation. There are two ways you could play what's been happening in Venezuela. One is it's bullish for prices because it injects geopolitical risk. It could reduce production in the country, or it could also add some risk to maybe the U.S. hitting other countries that are oil producers. There's been a lot of chatter on Twitter and other social media about what's happening in Iran, what's happening in other countries. So that could be something that the market looks at. They're kind of hedging that risk there. The other way you look at it is this clears the way for the U.S. to remove their sanctions and their blockade, essentially, on the shadow fleet ships and on the exports of sanctioned crude out of Venezuela. That would add more supply into the market. But then when you take a zoom out and you look at this in a really macro view, Venezuela is really not that big in the grand scheme of things. They produce less than 1% of global oil supply. While they do have vast reserves, it isn't clear whether or not Trump will be able to convince the Chevrons, the Exxons, those folks into investing in the country, the tens of billions of dollars that's required to really pump up that production.
Yeah, Stephen, tell us a little bit more about that. What sort of investment would be required? What sort of time frame would it happen over? And critically, I guess, what sort of security guarantees would there need to be?
Well, so when you speak to the analysts, you get all sorts of numbers, but I think the general view is that it's going to take about $10 billion per year over the next decade to get Venezuela back to where it was producing in the past. Now, to give you some context, Venezuela produces about 800,000 barrels per day of oil. Now, when you look at the early 2000s,
it was closer to 3 million barrels per day. And when you look at the 70s, it was 4 million barrels per day. So when Trump is talking about increasing, reviving this oil production, he's looking more at 3 million barrels. That's a more than tripling of production where we are right now. The reason why production has come down so much over the last 2 decades or so is because there hasn't been investment in infrastructure. It's because the country has been dealing with corruption, and also the sanctions have reduced a lot of the output as well, and customers requiring the fuel, and that reduced the amount of rigs on the ground as well. So to get us back up there, it's going to cost billions of dollars. And it's also going to take essentially a decade to get back here. Now, President Trump said on NBC earlier today that he's looking at getting this up and running, whatever that were to mean, in 18 months, which is really against
Steve, thanks so much for your insights on this. Steven Stupczynski, who leads our Asia energy coverage. Now, traders will also be watching today's 10-year Japanese government bond auction closely, with demand key to avoiding shocks across the curve. Bloomberg FX and rate strategist David Finnerty joins us now for more. David, what are we expecting in terms of demand, given where yields are on the 10-year?
Yeah, we think, again, you never know in these scenarios, but it's anticipated that demand will be quite decent for today's auction. The bid to cover ratio for the most recent auction last year in December was actually very good. So yeah, anything about the mid 3 to 4, so 3.5, should we say, could certainly be established today, particularly with yields higher. So you're looking at the 10 years about 2.12, 2.11. So that's the highest since you have to go back to the late 1990s. So yields at that level. So the market would anticipate good demand. Again, if there is weak demand, though, then that certainly doesn't bode well for the 30-year auction, which is due out on Thursday. So the market certainly can be looking at how this reacts, how the market reacts to this one, given that the 30-year is looming. And if today doesn't go well, as I said, the market will assume that it doesn't bode well for Thursday's auction either.
David, tell us about the yen as well. It's very weak. It's very range bound. Is there anything that could move the needle for the Japanese currency?
Yeah, if you're looking at dollar yen, which most people obviously focus on, it has been this basically 155 to 158 range since mid-November. Obviously, we know the BOJ hiked. The market shrugged its shoulders and said, "I need more than that." With the market already pricing 2 more BOJ hikes this year, and dollar yen still in that range, then really I think the question becomes, if the yen is to rally or dollar yen fall, it really comes from a dollar side of the equation. And with that in mind, you're looking for the US data, which is coming out this week, which heavily will be focused on US payrolls on Friday and US CPI next week. But certainly the payroll data, if that comes in weaker than expected, I think it's like average around 65,000 they're looking for. Say that comes in a negative number, then we know the markets are very happy to price in Fed rate cuts. They price in about 60 basis points of rate cuts so far this year. They'll happily add on to that and price in 3 quarter-point rate cuts if given a chance. If that was to happen, then obviously that put pressure on the dollar across the board. But obviously the yen would benefit from that. So I think in the near term, really it's the dollar side of the equation that the market's focused on for dollar yen.
What are we seeing in terms of the haven qualities in the greenback? Of course, there's been a rethink.
We have got to the point where literally anybody can build a fully working app without knowing how to code. This is Base 44. This is the first look at the current industry-leading AI app builder. And you wouldn't believe the kind of apps that people are creating. Smart nutrition apps, inventory trackers, onboarding tools, you name it. And if the only thing stopping me from making the app is the idea, why not build an app that gives me endless app?
Of that, even with the geopolitical backdrop.
Yeah, so the haven, it does sometimes, it depends on how it all plays out in the markets. I mean, at the end of the day, if there is a sudden market shock, the yen, the Swiss franc, and the dollar does tend to do well in the near-term reaction. Having said that, you're looking at more, at the moment, US equities rallying, so there's no idea of like, well, okay, there's a haven demand, therefore. There is the logic will go, well, do I invest in US then? Because US equity rallying, as therefore, so are other equities as well. But the idea, I think, this year in terms of what does US growth become, I think that becomes a key factor. And how does that US growth play out compared to other countries? And I think that will impact more in terms of this sort of haven trades, because at the moment, it's really a risk on trade that you're seeing in the market.
David, thanks very much. We'll watch as well the 10-year auction results in Japan today. As we said, Bloomberg FX and rate strategist David Finnerty. Now, let's take a look at how Asia stocks are faring, specifically Japan, South Korea. Yesterday, we saw the Kospi at those record highs, supported by the chip-related stocks. They're going the other direction today. What is doing well is Hyundai Motor, which at one point rose, 8% against a backdrop of its unveiling humanoid robots. We are seeing it erase some of those gains for the moment, but what's also interesting is this divergence we're seeing between Japan and South Korea. What is pulling ahead in Japan? We're seeing the bank-related names also doing well on top of what the chip stocks, including Tokyo Electron, I should say, are doing. And we'll be also talking to the Hyundai Motor Group Vice President and Head of Robotics Lab, Dong Jun-hyun, on Thursday from the CES in Las Vegas. Ahead of that, you can also catch a special edition of Bloomberg Tech Asia this Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. in Hong Kong, on Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. if you're watching from New York. Subscribers can use the function TV Go or watch live on Bloomberg.com. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
2 days. So we have a concert on the 24th and then one on the 31st. What kind of shit is that? So we gotta look at the tour
AI boom. Australia is attracting massive bets from global tech giants. Just last month, OpenAI partnered with NextDC to build a large computing cluster in Sydney. Amazon, Microsoft, and Blackstone are also planning to pour billions of dollars into local data centers. The government's new national AI roadmap aims to boost investment, expand skills, and embed AI across public services. For Swedish AI startup Legora is also rapidly expanding in Australia. The company, valued at $1.8 billion, aims to tackle the legal grunt work by automating tasks like contract review and due diligence. And joining us now is Legora Asia Pacific and Japan lead, Heather Patterson. Heather, thanks so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
You've recently completed a Series C funding, $150 million. What's the plan for the money?
We are rapidly expanding globally, and just having started in Australia last June, we're expecting to go from when it was just me to a team the size of 50 at this time June this year. We are seeing globally a huge appetite for legal AI. Firms like Linklaters, White & Case that are looking at how to use the technology to differentiate, and even locally a huge amount of competition here in the Australian market with firms like Minter Ellison and Allens that are looking at how to use the technology to expand their services.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about that? How is AI applied in the legal industry? How is it used?
Well, if you think back to 2023, there was, I guess, fairly rudimentary tasks being done by AI. And at the time, Goldman Sachs predicted that 40% of legal tasks could be completed with AI. And we're really seeing that play out today with ever-increasing complexity our technology being used to complete ever-increasing complex tasks. And what that actually turns into is not just review, not just translation, but automating end-to-end tasks using AI. Take an M&A process, for example. Previously, you may have only ever been able to review a subset of contracts as part of that process. But when it's time-bound, highly pressured, and a very strategic and confidential process, now law firms are able to provide that end-to-end review and apply their judgment.
And no, but Brian is off today.
Oh, so Chris.
Heather,
Yeah, Chris
April
will
in
be
Singapore
here after his lunch
That's the
break.
sound of an American oil
All
company
right,
hard
thank
at
you.
work.
All right,
Be a
thank
part
you.
of it.
God bless.
Listen up.
We salute to you, our
Hello,
hero.
my name is Adam Ferrari, and I'm the CEO of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you joining us at our next webinar where you can.
In Singapore here, to your point, I mean, even as we see these use cases, perhaps some lingering concerns about AI applications in such sensitive sectors such as legal sphere. What are you hearing in terms of how much convincing needs to be done? What's being done to sort of address some of these concerns?
2 hours.
Yeah, so I think with legal AI, it's not about if you're adopting AI, but what are you adopting? And to your point about the concerns around the use of AI, Legora, we really focus on ensuring there's the human in the loop, ensuring that there is the right security, the right privacy, and part of that is actually about not just buying AI, but how you adopt it. And what we're seeing firms really focus on when they work with Legora and when they choose to partner with us. It's about that change management process and how they are increasing AI literacy so that lawyers understand that this is just a tool in the toolkit from which they should apply their judgment and strategic guidance.
And you look after a number of markets across the Asia Pacific, including Japan. I wonder, do you see a bit of differentiation in the uptake and how open some of these firms are to the technology?
Yeah, look, I actually think there's an incredible appetite across the Asia Pacific region, and in individual markets themselves, the law firms that are the most ambitious, the first question we get asked is, hey, Heather, how can we adopt this quicker? How can we take our lawyers on this journey so that they understand the basics, but then they can access what the full capability of the platform and the models that that support it are. So across the region, certainly we see big competition here locally in Australia, but Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Korea, there's an incredible amount of interest because of the momentum.
Do you need to adapt your AI tools depending on which country they're being applied in? And is it a process of continuous adaptation as laws evolve and new laws get passed?
Look, I think that's a great question. Actually, it's not. I wouldn't say that there's a difference from a jurisdiction perspective, but it's about embedding it into your local way of working. And so firm-specific knowledge is going to get embedded into these tools as part of these more complex workflows.
I have to ask you the scary question, which is this going to put a whole lot of lawyers out of work?
Oh, I love this question, actually, because I think there's a great news story, and this is the best time to be a lawyer, actually. There's a huge amount of job creation in what we're seeing a trend on AI lawyers. And so firms that we're working with are now taking their lawyers that are practicing, whichever practice group it might be, but they're also got this interest in AI and understanding as to what it can do. And when you compare that together, it's really about how you're unlocking the capability within that practice group. And it's the same for Legora. We're hiring legal engineers, which is a new job that didn't exist just 2 years ago.
All right, Heather, thanks for joining us. That is Heather Patterson, Asia Pacific and Japan lead at Legora. And we've got more on Australia ahead. That's every Tuesday, 11:40 a.m. if you're watching in Sydney. That's 8:40 a.m. in Hong Kong. Also, you can tune into the Bloomberg Australia podcast, which delves into the biggest stories shaping the country's role in global business. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, or Bloomberg.com. We have more ahead on the Asia trade. This is Bloomberg.
You're watching the Asia trade. Now, the region's equity capital markets are expected to have another blockbuster year in 2026. Long dormant IPO plans coming back to life with major offerings expected from Chinese tech companies, including Baidu and Zepto. Bloomberg's Julia Fioretti joins us now for more. Julia, what are we expecting across Asia in terms of listings for the year?
they adjusted everything.
Well, Ava, we're expecting another
Yo, this
blockbuster
is
year, as
excellent
you
news.
said. As to whether the volumes will even exceed last year's, which were already at a 4-year high, it's still too early to tell. But it's certainly starting off with a lot of optimism, and mainly driven by the activity that we're seeing in Hong Kong and India. Those are likely to be
In
the two sort
April,
of
so
biggest
that's
markets in terms of IPO activity. In Hong Kong, well, we're expecting to see the revival of IPOs that had been dormant for years because of poor markets and other reasons. These include the listing of CK Hutchison's retail arm, AS Watson, as well as that of Chinese and agricultural technology giant Syngenta, which had pulled an IPO back in Shanghai a few years ago. And as to India, we're expected to see the IPO of Reliance Jio, which is likely to be it's the country's biggest ever. So there's certainly a lot of optimism about the activity continuing across the region this year, but mainly in Hong Kong and India.
Upwork is the best tool to find and hire high-quality freelance talent. It's free to
Yo,
post,
they're not
and you
even
don't pay till you
releasing
hire. Upwork's AI will search through candidates for you and help
Yo,
find
these
the best
people are
match for your
fucking
project.
ruthless,
It's hiring,
yo.
but
I'm
easy.
a fucking member here. What the heck, yo? This is unfair, yo. When you own a fucking private jet, you shouldn't have to fucking pay for
Are you
all this
looking to
extra
establish
shit.
your
What
business
the fuck?
using an address
Yo, they didn't tell
other
me
than your
none of
home?
this shit.
Well, at iPostal One.
That shit is a fucking money
Julia,
pit.
there's
What
a
the
whole
fuck? I
rush of
could have
tech
bought a sports
IPOs
car
coming
right
in
now.
Hong Kong later this month. Can you tell us what's on the pipeline?
There sure is, and it's mainly driven by the Chinese AI companies. Last week, we saw the listing of AI chip maker Biren, whose shares jumped about over 70% on their debut, underscoring the real optimism that we're seeing among investors about China's AI stories. And that's also because of the support that they're getting from Beijing as the US and China try to be the leaders in AI. This week, we're expecting to see the listings of large language model companies such as Zhepu and Minimax, as well as of another chip maker, Alavatar Corex. So there's really a lot of enthusiasm about the China tech, and it's sort of reminiscent of what we saw last year when DeepSeek really made its sort of world debut. And so we'll have to see whether the enthusiasm continues with these names and in the AI.
All right, Bloomberg's Julia Fioretti there. The top corporate stories that we're tracking: Steel Dynamics and Australian conglomerate SGH have made a joint $8.8 billion takeover bid for BlueScope Steel. Sydney-based SGH, controlled by billionaire Kerry Stokes, proposed acquiring Australia's biggest steelmaker and then selling its North American assets to Steel Dynamics. BlueScope has long been seen as a takeover target given the scale of its North American operations, which account for almost half its revenue. BlueScope shares up by almost 21% at the moment. Well, Bloomberg has learned that Goldman Sachs is raising a Japan real estate fund targeting about $500 million for property deals. Sources say Goldman has been pitching investors in recent months looking to take advantage of a resurgence in Japan's property market. The fund will focus on data centers, logistics, residential, and hospitality assets. Well, Disney says Zootopia 2 has become the highest grossing Hollywood film ever released in China when measured in local currency. The sequel has earned about $610 million since it was released in late November, surpassing 2019's Avengers Endgame. A report estimates animated movies generated nearly half of last year's China box office revenue, with 57 titles grossing more than $3.5 billion. Tesla's China factory shipments fell 7% in 2025, despite a last-minute bump in December. Preliminary data from China's Passenger Car Association show the automaker shipped more than 851,000 vehicles last year from its Shanghai plant. Tesla is struggling with a slowdown in global sales, losing its title as the world's largest EV maker to China's BYD. April.
Take a look at how futures are shaping up in the Greater China region. There is a tech focus underway, and we can talk a bit more about that. But take a look as well at how dollar China remains below the 7 handle. We did see that haven demand for the greenback a bit eroded following weak U.S. ISM manufacturing numbers. That strength is creeping back into the Chinese yuan. We'll watch the fix in the next hour when it comes to what's supporting supporting the housing. Tech has been doing fairly well, even on the mainland. TAIEX futures, even though pointing to those declines, it's worth noting that TSMC was supported by that upgrade just a day ago from Goldman Sachs. We'll see how that plays out today. Take a look at how Japan, South Korea are faring. It's interesting, despite the pullback that we are seeing in chip stocks now, including SK Hynix, Samsung Electronics, even Tokyo Electron, which started the day on the front foot, looking a bit tepid and shaky for the moment. What is helping the Japanese benchmarks and the broader-based topics is that broad-based gain that you're seeing among Japanese names. So that divergence between Japan and South Korea. Don't forget, we did see for the region's benchmark just yesterday reaching those record highs. That AI tech exuberance does seem to be pretty intact. Paul?
Quick word on commodities. Take a look at copper. It hit a record high, passing $13,000 a ton. There is a rush to get shipments to the US. A few concerns there about future tariff risks. Oil, meanwhile, pulling back a little bit, but mostly shrugging off the news flow out of Venezuela. That is it for the Asia trade. Markets coverage continues as we look ahead to the start of trade in Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Shenzhen. This is Bloomberg.
With same-day groceries and next-day deliveries, automation and robotics will have an important role to play in the future.
symbiotic. We've built AI to process enormous amounts of digital data. When you connect that data to a physical device, you end up with a robot with embedded AI. We call that physical AI.
The adoption of physical AI in robotics is a paradigm shift in the making. Jensen, it's been an astonishingly busy day for you in Washington, D.C., so I'm grateful for your time. You're sold out of Blackwell. That's what you see.
Yep. Absolutely. Stock market shorts. Closing the bell. China show. Okay, might be China show. Many Asia trade. Okay, might do a different.
In Shanghai, Shenzhen, and here in Hong Kong, you're watching the China Show. I'm Yvonne Mann with David Nicholas.
Good morning. We are counting down to the opening markets in Greater China. Our top stories today: Asian stocks extend a record-breaking global rally as investors look past geopolitical concerns. China in focus.
Let's see how much battery we have left.
Best start to the year since 2015.
AI remains the top market theme. NVIDIA boss Jensen Huang saying highly anticipated data center chips are
We'll be right back.
this year.
Also ahead, Nicolas Maduro.
You guys already know the modules.
Guilty to drug violence and weapons charges.